Welcome back, my friends, to The Chosen's blended harmony of the gospel. I'm Nancy, this is Mandy. We are on day 26, part 1. Lazarus dies and is raised from the dead. A friend dies. Now a man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair, and it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sisters sent a message to him, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When Jesus heard it, he said, "This sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after that, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." "Rabbi," the disciples told him, "just now the Jews tried to stone you, and you're going there again?" "Aren't there 12 hours in a day?" Jesus answered. "If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him." He said this, and then he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am on my way to wake him up." Then the disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will get well." Jesus, however, was speaking about his death, but they thought he was speaking about the natural sleep. So Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus has died. I am glad for you that I wasn't there, so that you may believe. But let's go to him." Then Thomas, called Twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let's go too, so that we may die with him." Lazarus is raised from the dead. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. Many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to comfort them about their brother. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." "Your brother will rise again," Jesus told her. Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world." Having said this, she went back and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." As soon as Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were there with her in the house, consoling her, saw that Mary got up quickly and went out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to cry there. As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." When Jesus saw her crying, and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked. "Lord," they said, "come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes also have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. "Remove the stone," Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, "Lord, there is already a stench because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I say this so that they may believe you sent me." After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips, and with his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unwrap him and let him go." So many great things in this story. Let's go back to the first part. So these are good friends. Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were Jesus' friends, and so they sent the message saying, "Lord, the one you love is sick." But when he heard it, he said, "This sickness will not end in death, but is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." And so when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days. So truly, he could have gone right then. It's only 2 miles away. They could easily have walked that, right? And then he could have been there and he could have just touched him and healed him. But he said this sickness will not end in death. He knew that there was a bigger plan and he wanted more people to see his power and God's glory. And so he actually stayed there and let Lazarus die so then he could go resurrect him. So then he knew that he had died and he said, let's go to Judea again. But Rabbi, the disciples told him, just now the Jews tried to stone you and you're going there again? Jesus' disciples were looking out for Jesus for sure. A couple days before that, the Jews had tried to stone Jesus because of what he had said. And they're like, let's not go that way again. But Jesus says, that's where we're going to go. Then he says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am on the way to wake him. And he said, well, Lord, if he's just fallen asleep, he'll get well. But Jesus was speaking about his death. So he plainly said, Lazarus has died, but I'm glad for you that I wasn't there so that you may believe. Let's go to him. So he's made it clear Lazarus is dead and that he is going to go and resurrect him. But it's so interesting what Thomas says. Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too so that we may die with him. So he kind of has a little negative attitude, but he's willing to die because he's saying if we go, we're going to get stoned or hit on the way or something. They're going to come and kill Jesus. So let's just go that we can die with him. But that is bold and honorable that he does want to go and die with Jesus. When they arrived, they found Lazarus had been in the tomb 4 days. And as soon as Martha saw, she ran out to him and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. So at first that's kind of harsh. She's like, Lord, if you'd been here, he didn't die. But which is true, but that seems kind of just really bold of her to say. But then she says this, which is great. Yet, even now, I know whatever you ask from God, God will give you. And he says, your brother will rise again. I know he'll rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And here's the clincher. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? So right there he's saying, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe that? And she says, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. That's really great of Martha. She realized you are the Son of God who has come into the world. She was boldly, proclaiming that. I'm not even sure at this point if all the disciples truly understood what his role was and his power and his authority. But she knew that he was the Son of God, the Messiah who had come into the world. Then he calls for Mary, and Mary comes out, and she says the same thing. Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And then he asks, where have you put him? And they say, come and see. And then Jesus wept. It's one of the shortest verses in the Bible. Jesus wept, just 2 words, but it says so much. Jesus had friends. He lived on this earth. He loved everyone, but he did have special friends. And Lazarus and Mary and Martha were his special friends, and he loved Lazarus so much. And it is painful when somebody dies. My mom just died, and I have cried a river. And so Jesus is weeping right now because Lazarus has died, and Lazarus was a special friend of his. Then he asked for the stone to be removed, and Martha reminds him that there's going to be a stink because he's been dead 4 days. And Jesus said, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they moved the stone away, and he says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I say this so that they may believe that you sent me. So he's doing this whole miracle mainly for their benefit, right? He let Lazarus die so then he could resurrect him. And he's saying, God, every time I pray, I know that you hear me. And that's good for us to know too. Every time we pray, we know that God hears us. But he's saying, I'm saying this publicly so that everyone out here can see and believe that here I am praying to you, and you are going to answer and come through in a big way. And then he says, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linens and strips wrapped around his face. And Jesus said, unwrap him and let him go. And I love that he says, Lazarus, come out. Because, I've heard different theologians say, if he didn't say Lazarus, if he just said come out, that all the dead people that could hear his voice would just come on out. And that would have been kind of fun too, to have a lot of people resurrected. But he just wanted to call Lazarus. So he said, Lazarus, come out. He came out. He was all bound up hand and foot because that's how they bury them. They wrapped him up in cloths. And they unwrapped him, and he got to live some more years. And can you believe that testimony? And of course, lots of people believed in Jesus because of that, because that was a big miracle. So I hope today you take away a couple things, that sometimes things happen in our life and we think, God, why are you letting this happen? I've had that with several things. With my husband's accident, that was a big thing that we had to go through. And, then my mom was sick for a really long time and then she passed away. And a lot of things happen in our lives, right? When we think, God, why are you allowing this situation? But He allows things to strengthen our faith, and also that our strong faith can be shown to the people around and that they can come to faith too. When people see you going through a hard time with your faith in God and not complaining all the time, they are strengthened in their faith as well. So remember that hard times have multiple reasons, and God's going to let us go through hard times, but He's also going to help us get through them. And in the end, who knows? You could have a big miracle waiting at the end for you. So I hope today you put your faith like Mary and Martha and say, you are the truth, you are the way, you are the life, you are the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in Jesus will never die. Do you believe that, my friend? I hope you do. And I hope you come back for more of the harmony of the gospel so your faith can be stronger like Mary and Martha's. Have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow. You can get your own copy of A Blended Harmony of the Gospels by The Chosen simply by going to thechosengifts.com. There you can find all kinds of wonderful merchandise to help build your faith this year. Be sure to check out their devotionals and their Bible studies. Have a blessed day.